So our working title for this is called Let's Panama City. It's good, right? You like it?
Said with a little twang in your voice.
Let's Panama City.
Yeah.
Well, you can always tell when somebody's not from here because they call it Panama City. Have you heard that? Like the newscasters do that a lot. Okay, so first of all, thank you for being on early in this show's history and coming in and being willing to even talk to us. I know you're extremely busy. But everybody, I'm here with one of our commissioners here in Panama City, Janice Lucas, and she's actually my commissioner.
Yes.
I own property in her ward that she's a part of. And so we wanted to have Janice on, and we're going to have all the commissioners and the mayor on just to have an open conversation about Panama City, a little bit about your background, how you got here, what you love about this town, some of the big projects going on, and then also to your vision for the future of the town, because we all want to spend the rest of our lives here and make it awesome. So if you would,
Yes.
just introduce yourself a little bit to the audience and tell us who you are and a little bit about yourself.
So native Panama Cityan. I was born here over at Bay Memorial Hospital, first of my siblings to be born in a hospital. So that's a little fun fact. I like to interject at some of those gatherings where people want to know something that someone may not know. So my parents met here. My mother had come when her stepfather was painting at Tyndallfield. My father was born here. Somewhere they met as teenagers. And when Tyndallfield was built, the job was over. You know, my mom's family went back to Gant, Alabama, in Covington County. My father went up there and got her, and they got married. So that's how I got here.
Yeah.
And my father was born here. His father migrated from Cordele, Georgia, and brought his father with him. So counting those who moved here, my great-grandfather, grandfather, and then my father born here, I say I'm a fourth generation Panama Cityan.
I love that. I love your dad just was like, went up and got her and brought her back. I like that, right? It's nice. Like, I want to live, yeah. And you know your family's been here a long time when you can say things like Bay Memorial and Tyndallfield.
Yes.
That tells you, like, you know,
Yes.
the original names of these places and these things. Yeah.
In fact, my grandfather bought property over in the St. Andrews area and then sold it to others who moved here. So he had, you know, some land called Lucas Quarters.
So you're deep in the history of this place.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about your background before you became a commissioner. Because I mean, I know you, we're friends, and I know your background, but tell folks who don't know, they just know you maybe as a commissioner. What you like? Give us the lead up.
So in high school, I thought I wanted to be an accountant, but I had Miss Anna Kelly as a speech teacher, and I loved Miss Kelly, and I loved to talk, and she offered me the opportunity to apply to go to FAMU, Florida A&M University, for a 2-week newspaper journalism workshop. But you had to write an essay. You know, why you wanted to be a journalist. Well, I thought I wanted to be an accountant, but for 2 weeks in the summer away from my mom and my parents, I could want to be a journalist. So I wrote the essay, was selected, and that changed the professional course of my life. I went to Gulf Coast first because my mother said, well, you know, you can go wherever you want to go, but my money's going to Gulf Coast. So I learned early to follow the money, and went to Gulf Coast and then to Florida A&M University, where I graduated with a broadcast journalism degree. Chose newspaper, got to travel around for a year as an intern with Capital Cities Communications, worked at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, or as they say, Fort Worth, and the Red Bank Register. Highlight there was I got to interview B.B. King, and then Kansas City, Missouri, 4 months. And surprise, surprise, at the end of that year, I wanted to come home and work for the News Herald and do the kinds of stories that I'd seen in those other areas, particularly covering the Black community. So I came home, got a job at the News Herald, worked there, and that led to being recruited to Gulf Coast as a journalism professor. So I got to go back to my alma mater and teach journalism and literature and just one thing after another thing, you know.
Thank goodness Mom made you go to Gulf Coast and come back to your alma mater, right?
Yes. Yes.
I love that. You can go wherever you want, Janice, but my money's going to Gulf Coast. I love that's a great.
Yes.
What a good mom line that is, right? I love that.
Yeah.
Love that. Okay, so you obviously have deep history here, and you had that kind of typical trajectory. It was like, let me go out into the world and do some things in other places, maybe bigger cities, and learn some stuff, meet people. But there's after a while, I want to go back home. I want to come back here. What do you think it is about this place? Because that's a very common arc for people, especially in the creative community.
So I made friends. I got to know people. I did things that I couldn't do here. I mean, the arts communities in those areas. Every weekend when I was in New Jersey, I would go to Brooklyn. My brother lived there. So I got to go to Broadway and to see things that I couldn't see, in Panama City. But when I really began to reflect at the end of the time in Kansas City, Missouri, I missed being known, connecting with people who knew me and who I knew. And for stories I'll not go into on a podcast, I was like, whoo, you don't do certain things when you're known. So maybe my little Pentecostal upbringing kicked in. It's like, I need to be where people know me and I know them, so I don't do crazy stuff.
I'm sure your mother was happy about that. It's that your mom in the background. Okay, so you love this town. Let's fast forward a little bit to you. You have a successful life, successful career, and you decide to run for commission. So which ward, for everybody, which ward are you the commissioner?
So Commissioner Ward 2. It was my third time running for office. And I ran first in 2006 when there was an open seat for the Florida House of Representatives for our district. And ended up being the Democratic nominee against the Republican nominee, Jimmy Petronas. That was his first win. And so once he became the Republican nominee, I was like, But I thought, well, maybe I should just run, for the city commission. So I did that in 2009. That too was an unsuccessful bid. So I've wanted to be a part of decision making at the political level for a long time. And again, because I want to represent the folk whose ideas, whose interests may not always be represented.
Who are those folk?
So let me first say that quite often the number of people who are registered aren't 90% of those who are eligible to register. So we miss a lot of voices there as well. And then what tends to happen is the folks who participate in the voting process, we hear their voices. And so I've long wanted to engage others who, for whatever reasons, think, oh, I don't do politics or whatever. And Ward 2 is a very mixed ward. I mean, folks, Ward 2 Commissioner represents Glenwood and Millville, but it also extends north on Harrison Avenue and on Highway 77 to Baldwin. With the redistricting that occurred a couple of years ago, it now extends on 15th Street to Frankfurt, and then over to the eastern border of Everett Avenue. So it's a pretty big ward.
It's a big ward.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I mean, I own a property in Millville, so that's obviously where my attention is. But wow, yeah, okay, yeah, that's a very big ward.
Yes.
So tell me about. I mean, you mentioned some of these folks that don't normally have a voice. I mean,
Yeah.
people voting. Obviously, people
Yes.
need to go out and vote more. But what's the makeup? What are the character? What's the general lay of the land in Ward 2?
So we've got the affluent up North Harrison Avenue, those neighborhoods, and we also have some of the lowest socioeconomic census tracts and census blocks in the county, down in Glenwood and Millville. And so quite often, people who are struggling, they're focused on just making ends meet and don't really feel that they have a voice in what goes on in the greater community.
And maybe can't go to a charrette, for instance, or can't. It's harder for them to.
Yes.
You know,
But When I ran last year and went door to door, I found that there were I won't say, I don't know how many, but there were people who are, life is good, I'm good, I don't vote.
They don't. I mean, they're not unhappy, right? They don't. If it's not
Yeah.
broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, until they get
Till it's
upset
broke.
about something, right? Yeah.
And then it's yeah. So you clearly had a passion for this and public service. Information. You were in the news business, right? Telling stories and staying up with what's going on in town. When you became a commissioner, what was the most eye-opening thing? The thing that you were like, oh, I didn't expect this. Good thing,
Yeah.
bad thing, whatever. Just a thing that was unexpected.
Being a member of the Destination Panama City Board of Directors,
Okay.
Being on the Transportation Metropolitan Transportation Planning Organization. So once becoming the commissioner, I was aware that we also, as commissioners, make up the Community Redevelopment Agency Board of Directors. But there's the Transportation Planning Organization Board, which is affiliated with the Emerald Coast Regional Planning Council, the Destination Panama City Board that determines what we do with the tax dollars from our bed tax. So a lot came with just being sworn in as a commissioner that I didn't expect. Expected people not to like some stuff, expected people to it's like, yeah, that's great. But one of the, I guess, another eye-opening thing is the respect that people have for being a commissioner. At my church, people call me commissioner, and I'm like, I'm Janice. I'm here today. As Janice, not as a commissioner, but the pride that many people feel that I know a commissioner. I went to the home of one of my classmates. There was an issue that I knew she was concerned about that was coming before the commissioner. Now, this is someone who a little bit younger than my mother would have been, but certainly had a child, and so she is like a mother figure. And she's like, my commissioner is here. I'm like, I'm just Janice that went to school with your son, So that kind of reception has been good, but it's also a responsibility that I just feel, Lord, help me get this right. People trust me, and I want to represent them well. And when we've got conflicting interests, that's tough.
I knew you all were on the Destination Panama City Board. I didn't know you were on the transportation planning and all these other things. I would imagine most people don't know that. They think you go like once a month or whatever it is to the government building and sit and vote on a few things.
Yeah.
But you all have a lot of influence and say across big chunks of the town, it sounds like. So when people are voting for commissioner, it's not just those meetings they see on YouTube. Like there's a whole other.
Right.
Okay. See, I did not know that.
And there's a whole group of people out there who think we're getting paid and by all these.
Wait a minute, you're not getting rich? You're getting rich. You're getting rich on being a commissioner.
Well,
aren't you?
where is it? Show me the money, right?
Where is it? Right.
So it's a full-time job with half-time pay.
Wow. So it's the sort of the definition of a public service thing, because you could be doing other stuff. You became a commissioner in a pretty historic time for the town. The storm. Everybody who's listening to this, if you're in Panama City, when I say the storm, everybody knows what I'm talking about. They're talking about Hurricane Michael, but also too, we are undergoing and making historic, big decisions on things in this town. So if you're fine with that, I'm just going to go kind of around the, kind of down the list of all the sort of big things, big public things that people are talking about. And you mentioned people disagree on, and they want to, or maybe there is some either misunderstanding or misinformation about this that people that that you as a commissioner can really help us understand better. So why don't we talk about one? MLK is in Ward 2, right? Yeah. So let's start in your ward. Let's talk about the MLK Center. I mean, I drive by there, I see big piles of dirt, I see them tearing stuff up, and there's progress going. Talk to me about what's going on with that and
So
and the
it's,
future of it.
it's a 19 point something million dollar, I just say $20 million project. And I'm excited that it's going to be state of the art, not just another recreation center for sports. There's going to be a state of the art STEM lab there, a cooking and instructional kitchen, community room, broadcast studio. So opportunities for our children to learn about the wave of the future in terms of technology. FSU, Florida State University, the Ascent program has been working to make sure that certifications are available in schools. I see that kind of programming coming to the MLK Rec Center. 2 large basketball courts that then can be subdivided into smaller courts, outside soccer field and green space. It's going to be a phenomenal building.
I mean, I was looking at the renderings, and
Yeah.
it looks pretty remarkable. So $20 million, a lot of money, right? And I know whenever one of these big projects comes up, that's, of course, I mean, that makes sense that the citizens are the most concerned with how much stuff costs, where's the money come from, et cetera, et cetera. So let's use the MLK Center, because this is somewhere where just me personally, when I'm on Facebook and I'm looking around, and it's me personally trying to understand this stuff. Let's talk a little bit about the money, not the dollar value, but like where it comes from and how those trade-offs are made and how, because so to simplify it, the most common question or critique I see just out there is, wow, $20 million, how many potholes could you have fixed for $20 million? So talk to me about why the $20 million at that building, kind of where it came from and why what it can be used for and cannot be used for.
So just going back to the storm, right? We essentially had to rebuild our major buildings. Some rebuilt, some renovated. The King Center had to be torn down and rebuilt. Last summer, we had a strategic workshop where we looked at 5 key areas in the community: the MLK Rec Center, the Marina Civic Center, the 2 marinas, and the Martin Theater. So how do we rebuild, renovate? Do we rebuild, renovate? Those were the questions. And there's a little bit of money all over the place for everything that was damaged or destroyed.
And we say with a little bit of money, most of this is FEMA?
FEMA money,
FEMA,
insurance money.
Okay, but essentially money that was a result in some way or
Yes.
other from Hurricane
Yes.
Michael. Okay.
We hired consultants who went after grants. And those grants are primarily for infrastructure, for those potholes and so forth. We did the strategic planning to look at how can we use these other pieces of money, put them together to do some big things, right? And so there was money from the building, the insurance building for the old city hall, old buildings that were down on the marina. We put some of those monies together, insurance money, FEMA money, to make sure we had enough for these projects. And with the MLK Rec Center, we're still short a little bit, but there's a new market tax credit program for buildings and resources in underserved neighborhoods for which the Glenwood community qualifies. And so there'll be an opportunity to recoup those. Our legal department is working with some advisors on doing what we need to do in order to recoup those monies. And the good thing about it is that it can't just be a building. It has to have state-of-the-art, new technology, those things that we're bringing to the Glenwood community as part of it. So I'm excited about that.
These multiple pots of money, these sort of little bit of this, little bit of that, I think there's probably a lot of misunderstanding about some of how that money moves around in the government. So
Yes.
some of this money, the way I understand it, has very particular rules on it.
Yes.
Like you can't just, it's not like your household budget where you can
Right.
say, let's move this money over to that. Take vacation money and buy a new car. Can't do that.
Right.
So talk about where some of this money comes from, but also why you all chose those big projects, as opposed to say, parks or some other things that the city also needs help with?
So there was the visioning process that happened after Hurricane Michael, the charrettes downtown, and then in 20 and 21 in the other neighborhoods, Glenwood, Millville, St. Andrews, listening to what the community said we wanted to happen, and building on visioning that had happened, years prior to the storm as well. And so the grant funding, the $300 million in grants that we have received, primarily are going for the infrastructure, for those potholes, for those water mains, and so forth.
So let me say that number again. How much money?
$300 million.
So there's $300 million being spent on
Infrastructure.
roads,
So the
pipes,
yeah. When you
stations.
travel around and you see what's going on with the roads in downtown, over in the Cove, Cherry Street project, and now we're expanding to other areas. But the catch to that was it's reimbursement.
Yeah.
So you got to spend the money, then they'll give it back to you on a timeline. And we didn't have $300 million to spend. So we were able to leverage that with a $150 million loan, the largest loan the city has ever taken out. Because the idea is that we're going to rebuild as holistically as we can. Not just we're going to do all the roads and then in 10 years we'll come back and look at our civic infrastructure with the marinas and so forth. You talked about how we put the monies together. When you look at the Martin Theater, the MLK Rec Center, and the Marina Civic Center, those are not necessarily the kinds of programs that compete with private dollars. But the two marinas would be putting the city in direct competition with private marinas and private dollars. So then we start looking at what do we do P3 projects with? How do we prioritize, the marinas over, say, the MLK Rec Center and so forth. So the public-private partnerships became a way to do that. There are private entities that can come and build a Harrison's and build a Hotel Indigo and spur growth, right? So that's what we're looking at, and it takes time to negotiate all of those. So, that was the first one out, was let's do something on the marina. In the meantime, there was the fight going on with FEMA as to whether the Marina Civic Center needed to be demolished or, we didn't win that one. We wanted to get a whole new Marina Civic Center. In the meantime, we had to make a decision last year. What do? We didn't want to tear it down. But for me personally, looking at the Marina Civic Center versus the Martin Theater, I thought if we've got to choose what we preserve, let's preserve the Martin Theater, particularly when we can bring the two buildings alongside as part of that plan.
So I want to back up, because that was a really nice, complete thought about how some of the decision making around the money for these big signature projects. But you mentioned that some of these projects are better suited to being privatized. Now, that's not the word you use, but tell me if that's correct or not. But in other words, we the city have a site, a place that we are going to own, and we're going to keep owning it. But we as a city are not suited, nor do we have the expertise
or the money
to build and operate X.
Right.
And then there are some things where the city owns a building or a facility where it makes more sense to put government dollars to fix that up, as opposed to letting a private company come in with a blank lot and build everything from scratch, and then they have an agreement to manage it or whatever. Right. Is that fair?
I think that's a fair assessment, yes.
Okay. And so when you're looking at these projects, say MLK, Martin,
Marina
Civic Center, or whatever ends up there, those are those ones that are more city kinds of projects. So the idea is, okay, we have this money, let's pool this money on that, get it done, and then to figure out how we get it to manage it, probably with hiring a company. So then you all said, okay, that's gonna, again, I'm saying it the way I understand it, so please correct this if need be. let's pool our money on those big things so we can get those big things done. And then the marinas, there are these companies out there that like are very good at just giving them a marina and saying, build the thing and run it for us.
Well, one of the things I've come to understand is that government shouldn't be directly competing with private businesses, because certainly we're in a position as government that we've got some advantages that private businesses don't have. For instance, we're not taxed. So
you want big buildings.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then you take a marina, for instance, and we've got a property that has an international market. Now, if you're in business and you're selling a product, quite often you want to get the best price you can for it. With public government and public lands, we want to make sure that it remains open to the public. So those are considerations that I take into consideration when determining public-private. How do we do this? And one of the reasons I ran for office was to bring a political will to working with our nonprofit community as well. And a nonprofit, people often think of more as a charity. That's a mission. A nonprofit is a business with a charitable mission. And if a nonprofit doesn't profit, it can't fulfill its mission. It can't just be losing money every year or just dependent upon the kindness of strangers and people who know to just make sure their budgets are covered every year. And so just as government would say, hey, we've got a need for a business to do XYZ, we'll put out a request for proposal and let the business community bid on it. Panama City is a urban community. We've got the urban neighborhoods that are not in the rest of the county. So that means we've got some particular challenges that nonprofit businesses are well able to handle. And so instead of just thinking of them as a charity that we're just going to give a donation to and let them do good work, let's look at how do we address some of these issues, these social issues, for which there are businesses who are doing that good work. Bring that perspective, and I have that conversation with people, particularly when they say, oh, well, when it comes to nonprofits, we don't want to pick winners and losers. And so when you look at our arts community, for instance, when we look at the Marina Civic Center, the Martin Theater, we're looking at those venues that are primarily run by nonprofit agencies. The city partners with Bay Arts Alliance, a nonprofit, to operate the Panama City Center for the Arts, as one example. And so Bay Arts Alliance has to operate as a business. It cannot come up every year short of money. It has to have sound accounting practices and so forth in order to work with, to provide the programming that it does every year. And so the same is true for other nonprofits as well.
I like that explanation. So let's go around the horn here. We talked about MLK, talked about the marinas, and why you chose, why we're moving toward privatizing. That's the word for it, right? We're letting a private company.
And let me just say, I'm speaking for the reasons I've made the decisions that I've made.
That's right. And we're going to interview all the other commissioners and the mayor and everybody else, so people can all give their perspective on this. The Civic Center, okay, or that site. I'm not sure what we're going to call it next, right? But it's always been called the Marina Civic Center. After all these years and all the sort of stuff that we went through to get us as far, you all chose, and I believe you voted for to demolish it.
So that wasn't my first choice, and I refer to having been elected as now being on this side of the oath. I took an oath to do what's in the best interest of our city government and of our residents in the community. And before being elected, I don't want to tear it down. I think we've torn down too many historic buildings in our community over the years. And so I wasn't one to tear it down. I graduated high school at the Marina Civic Center. I saw plays and the Ebony Fashion Show back in the day. And B.B. King. I interviewed him in New Jersey and saw him here in Panama City. So I didn't want to demolish the building. But looking at what it would cost to try to make that box work, looking at the value of the property and the venue, and then how long it will take us to get another theater up, I thought the best use of that property, the best use of that location would be better served if we were to demolish, start over, put our efforts into building a premier civic center in our community.
And I think Commissioner Granger kind of spearheaded this. The idea was, because I'll tell you just straight up, as a guy, just as just Kevin speaking, as a member of the local arts community, I completely understand the logic of knocking it down. Mm-hmm. But my fear, just me personally, is like, man, that building gets knocked down, it's going to leave our conversation, and mm-hmm. we're not going to think about it. And then in 10 years, people, young people mm-hmm. are going to never know there was anything there, mm-hmm. and then we'll never have one. But I know Commissioner Granger, I think it was Commissioner Granger, said, on the heels of knocking it down, we're going to go ahead and put out,
yes.
I don't know if you did an RFP or,
yes.
And by the way, for people who don't know what an RFP is, a request for proposal. Mm-hmm. So that just says, we as a city want to do this project.
Right.
Companies come and please bid on this.
Yes.
For a company to start thinking about what
mm-hmm.
can be there next, so we don't have this lag time where we might forget we had a civic center
right.
there. Is that the idea? That's my hope anyway. I'll put it that way.
Yes. Our idea is to put an amphitheater there. Mm. We've also moved forward with hiring a consultant who will help us put together packages to attract investors who would help to build a performing arts center in our community. So we didn't just say, okay, we're tearing it down, next. We've also begun moving very strategically to do things that would put something on that spot where the Civic Center now is located that is a gathering place, an amphitheater. And the Bay Arts Alliance has been doing their backstage pass mm-hmm. there, and people are coming out just as they did at the Civic Center to support the arts.
Again, me personally,
mm-hmm.
I was encouraged to see that the commission was like, okay, we're already thinking of the next thing. Mm-hmm. When we knock this down, we're already moving to like, okay, what's the next building on there?
And then moving to renovate the Martin theater.
Let's talk about the Martin. Let's move to the Martin.
Yes.
Because that's the one that, that's the icon, right? And that's also the one that just most recently had news around it when mm-hmm. you all allocated that money there mm-hmm. and decided to go and chose the construction company. So talk to me about tell us the story of what's going on with the Martin.
So as you say, it's the iconic theater in our community. And we're looking to renovate it into a premier hall so that there will be the ancillary buildings that will allow for more activities and events. And that's something that we're missing in Panama City, event centers where folks can gather. And they opened 131 right down there near Trigo. I mean, it's all the way, often filled with different activities, weddings, events, civic meetings, and so forth, the SAP House. But we need larger venues. And so that's one thing that the Martin Theater renovation will allow us to do.
Yeah, as someone who was part of throwing a film festival down here and looking for big buildings, I happen to know the capacity on basically every building downtown because we needed a
yes.
big space to throw a party or something.
Yes.
And the biggest one we have downtown is the upstairs gallery at the Center for the Arts. It's
mm-hmm.
like 150 people.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have any big, right downtown.
Right.
Now I know we have like Bay High has its place, but it's not quite. Those are good things. They aren't mm-hmm. quite the same things.
Right.
They're not like a Martin Theater. So the Martin Theater. As I've learned, and full disclosure to the audience, I was on the citizen group a few mm-hmm. years ago that helped conceive what the next version of that would look like. So I do know more, I think, probably mm-hmm. than the average person. But when we say Martin Theater, that's almost that's not quite the full story. That money is like $32 million. Mm-hmm. and I want to dissect that money a little bit too. But the theater is what people know, right? It's got the beautiful facade. It
Yes.
has the seats. It's the
Yes.
theater that we all went to. But you mentioned these ancillary buildings. So that $32 million-ish
for
project
3 buildings.
is a
Yeah.
big multiplex. Like
Yes.
it's 3 whole, essentially brand new buildings.
Mm-hmm.
So if you would walk me through the footprint, like so I guess start on 4th Street there with, is it the Tennessee House is going to be on the
That's on the when you're facing the Martin Theater. So you've got the
so
old
we're
Tennessee
we're standing at
saloon,
the clock, right? We're standing
right.
at the clock in the roundabout on the
Yeah.
far left over here. Okay.
Yes, so you've got the old Tennessee House, then you've got the theater itself, and then you've got what had become the Downtown Improvement Board. Did a walkthrough. I did a walkthrough of that last year, and it's going to be quite the puzzle, I think. When you come to historic renovations, you know, you never know exactly what you're going to find. But one of the two of the things that were just impressed me was one below the street level, the building that's, I believe it's the DIB, old DIB building, that side. There's a wall that teenagers did art on from the 70s, you know. So that was one thing. I was like, wow, if we can capture that, because, you know, we're mural city now, capture that. And then I was told the story that there's a tunnel that's closed up, but that a funeral home used to use back in the 20s or 30s, so that they didn't take the body from the funeral home across the street to the parlor. They would take it under the street. So all kind of neat historical things like that will be a part of it. But there are going to be several landings where different events can be held in different rooms. So it's going to be.
And I think like a new bar or slash
Yes.
restaurant in there,
Yes.
an event space. I mean, it's much more than just a 500-person seat.
Yeah, I like the
theater.
word you said, multiplex, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, one screen, but many different venues within it
Yeah.
for events.
So the $32 million, it's easy to think, and I didn't. By the way, I didn't know this either. I had to learn this when that news broke, that you all decided to consolidate all these different pots of money on these few big signature
Right.
projects. People saw $32 million and they were like, "My goodness, that's a lot of money."
Because they're
But-
thinking just the 300-seat Martin Theater,
Right.
They're not thinking of the ancillary buildings, the different levels,
Yeah.
and the event space, the restaurant, you know, all
So
of
this
that.
is like and I think it's like 488 seats or just under 500.
Yeah, we've
something like
increased
that.
the seats, yes.
The $32 million is it right that 30 million of that is FEMA money? 2 million of that is actually City of Panama City money.
Yes.
That came from taxpayers.
If it's not exactly those numbers, it's certainly
close. Okay.
overwhelming.
So in other words, I just from what I read, it seemed like there was an impression with folks that like, whoa, that's 32 million of our tax, like us local tax dollars.
Yeah.
And that's not totally true. It's like 2 million of that. You put the 2 million in and you get 30 million more out of this FEMA. Is that a good way to say that?
And that's, I think that's a good way to say it. And that's what we were trying to do, is like, how do we come out of this catastrophic event that happened to us better without having to expend as many of our tax dollars? So you take a $300 million infrastructure series of grants, state revolving fund dollars, federal dollars, and you say, okay, this is how we're going to fix our system underneath. And that isn't even enough to fix all the roads. We still have projects that we're looking for funding for, because they prioritize them with a heat map. Where's the worst, right? And where do we go first? And some people think, oh, well, we went to the Cove because of the affluent people who live there. But when you look at the fact that the Cove is one of the oldest neighborhoods, it is right along the bay. You know, I was listening to conversation at City Hall where they talked about 30 years ago, directors were incentivized to keep their repair costs down, to keep their maintenance costs down. And so we have, unfortunately, a history where we did not maintain our water and sewer lines. And so they were already crumbling, and then along comes Hurricane Michael.
And so, I mean, the most famous example of that is when the yacht club caught fire, right? And the hydrants failed is because, you know, these were, and I know it's not your ward, but I mean, the infrastructure, when we say infrastructure, people think roads, I think, but all of this piping and all this sewer and all these catchments and all this lift stations and all the things that are that you can't see, and they're not sexy, they're not beautiful like the Martin Theater, but when your buildings catch fire and you can't turn your hydrants on, like that stuff takes money to.
So that was one.
That's
hydrant.
the 300 million that's going on right now, right? You said.
Yes.
It's mostly stuff like that. Okay.
So that was one hydrant. The firefighters knew it when they arrived. They know, you know, some that are out of service, and so sometimes people think, oh, wow, you know, something happens and they're not going to be able to put the fire out. Well, that fire was far gone before it was known, and so when the firefighters got there, there was no way they could save it. And you know, you said, so it's not in my ward, but there are structures that are throughout the community that transcend a ward, and the St. Andrews Yacht Club is one of them. In fact, they've got a sailing camp going on this summer, and you know, my other hat I wear is as executive director of the League Coalition, and we worked with Yacht Club and St. Joe to provide scholarships for students who otherwise would not be able to afford it to go there to learn how to sail. And that's been something we've talked about for years, and we're able to make that happen this year. And so, you know, Martin Luther King Rec Center, you know, it is specific to the Glenwood community because of the history of the men and women in the Negro Improvement Association and the Negro Women's Club who bought the land and deeded it to the city with the restriction that it would always be used for recreation. But it transcends that Glenwood community.
So anybody in the city can go and use that facility. This is, I mean, it's in Glenwood, but it's not like there's no Glenwood card you have to walk in and show, right? You can just go in there and use that facility. Yeah.
And same is true for Oakland Terrace. When we had the big day, the baseball day, opening day, I think it's called, you know, they were sharing the story of how the land was bought by residents, citizens, for the Oakland Terrace ballpark, the Oakland Terrace Park, and Oakland Terrace School. And those lands must always be used for those purposes.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
I love that. I didn't know that. Yeah, that's great. And that also kind of helps explain why some of these decisions are made. It's like, that's the rule. Like, we have to build this here because that's, okay. So our last kind of big topic, and then we'll sort of bring it in for a landing, but let's touch the third rail. Let's talk about Beach Drive. Let's just get, what is the status of that project? And talk to me about your perspective on the multi-use path going in on Beach Drive, because I think also too, that project is indicative. It's a standalone hot project right now, but also I think it's indicative of, depending on how that decision goes for other projects, it's going to have ripple effects, in other words. So talk to me about Beach Drive.
So it was determined by the previous commission to move forward with that project. It would take now someone on the commission to say we don't want it, to stop it, and to bring that to fruition. When I became elected, I met with the folks on Beach Drive who very much are against it, those homeowners, property owners, because I had to do my due diligence. On the other side of the oath, having gone to the charrettes, having looked at, you know, what I'd like to see our city build back as, I thought, oh man, that'd be a great addition to our city. And having met with the property owners, having listened to and looked at what they've presented and so forth, I'm still in favor of moving forward with the path. And it's one of those decisions where it's one of those situations where what a group of people want is different from what another group of people want, and so, you know, that's what we're elected to do, is to make those decisions.
And I think anybody can understand the people who live in that neighborhood, their
Yeah.
concerns. I mean, I think they're legit. I mean, if I've lived
Yes.
on Beach Drive, I'd have a lot of that. There is really, I think, valid concerns. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that unfortunately, this one's gotten particularly, divided, and people have strong feelings either way. But I mean,
Yeah.
I think anybody who lived along that road
Mm-hmm.
would be concerned if you're talking about doing this big public project literally in their backyard.
In their
Now,
front yard.
Front yard is part.
Yes.
Pardon me. Yeah,
Yeah.
Front, in the front yard. I can always forget that. But of course, the other side of this is that the property where this whole project is happening, none of this is private property. This is all owned by the city.
That's the interesting part. You've got the public right-of-way, which is the road, and public right-of-way along Beach Drive in some instances extends further into the yard that a property owner has, enjoyed.
Yeah.
And so now when the city says, well, we want to expand it, then that's going to be a loss because they've been able to enjoy property that's public right-of-way, but hasn't been used. There is the historical walking path that was there many decades ago. People have different fond memories, right? I lived on Fortune Avenue, same street that the Oakland Terrace ballpark is on. Would drive down to Beach Drive, hang a left, and we went to town to do shopping and so forth. And I always enjoyed that view. In fact, as a young woman, it's like, I would like to own a house there one day.
Would be all right.
Yes,
Yeah.
I certainly understand the concerns that people have. At one of the meetings, there was, I think this was a marina meeting, we were admonished to remember that we were making decisions that affect generations, and I was like, yeah, I know,
That's the big job of being a commissioner, especially at this time, because we're not going to, hopefully, not ever have to go through something like this, the Hurricane Michael again. But what it did was it laid out this tray of historic decisions you all are making. Like, this is
Yeah.
not everyday commission stuff. You
Yeah.
get to rebuild a 90-year-old theater and a civic center and our marinas and redesign our road systems and so many big historic
yeah,
things going on. So with Beach Drive, you said essentially, let me put it this way: the idea of the project, the money to be spent, the grant from the state, is going to be done or has been voted on. Are we down to now deciding what exactly the nuances of the design? Is that where we are? Or
so
where are
yes.
we?
Yes, so each phase of the project, we have the public meetings to determine what is going to happen next, and so we're moving along that process.
Okay. But it's essentially that we are going that direction. That project will happen. Some version
Yeah.
of that project will happen.
I believe it was last month when the homeowners, one of them asked us individually to state where we were
Yeah. Okay.
on the path, and it was clear then that this current commission is supporting what has been approved by the previous commission,
Okay. All right.
with the exception of the mayor, who's very vocal that
Yeah.
he is not in favor of the path.
Sure. And by the way, we have Mayor Rohan scheduled to be on this show, so he can share his views on all these same sorts of things. Okay, so thinking over your life and your history in Panama City and this big job, this big historic job. I mean, we're gonna, one way or the other, this town is going to remember the names of you all, right? The commission at this time, at this moment, because of all these big decisions that you're having to make. We're downtown right now. We're in the heart of historic downtown Panama City. By the way, I have to give a shout out to my friend Jennifer Berg. We're in the Berg Law Building. She let us
Yes.
use her gorgeous little office.
Yes.
She and Brandon. So thank you, Jennifer. Shout out to you for letting us use your wonderful building. But I mean, we're looking out this window right now. We see this gorgeous downtown and the way it's come. What excites you most right now about living commissioner aside, just being Janice from Panama City, what excites you most about what's going on in this town right now?
The rebirth. The rebirth of downtown is very evident. You know, we're now getting ready to start the second and final phase of the cobblestoning and rebuilding of the road in downtown Panama City, historic Harrison Avenue. I've been calling what I envision for the Glenwood community a renaissance. The Martin Luther King Recreation Center is a $20 million commitment, and I've been asking for community members, for investors, for folk who come home for family reunions who are interested in rebuilding Martin Luther King Boulevard. You know, it was once the downtown, if you will, of the black community during segregation. And, you know, folk sometimes don't want to talk about it. It's a part of our history. But the reality is, if we don't talk about it, there's a whole group of people and families who feel like what they experienced, the good as well as the bad, is non-consequential, you know. One of the projects that we've done under my leadership is the historical marker unveilings of just saying, hey, right here on this corner was Lee's Gulf Station. You know, hey, right here on this corner was Anderson Service Station. The longest open building on MLK business, African American owned, is, you know, what was Grady's 007. And people are coming home to be part of those unveilings. That has really struck me, you know, because the city is acknowledging that there were folk and businesses and people that were positive and that did good in the community. And so, you know, one way to think about it is looking at the class of 1968 from Rosenwall High School. That class, to call themselves the class of change, they didn't get to graduate their senior year from Rosenwall High School because desegregation occurred. And 50 years later, there was a graduation program where they got Rosenwall High School certificates at the Bay District School's office, and it brought grown men and women to tears, because when you think about school, when you think about those relationships, and to just have all of that done away with as though it never existed, that's hurtful. But in this rebirth period, in this Renaissance time, we're saying, not only in downtown Panama City and in St. Andrews, but in Millville and Glenwood, there are folks who are interested in rebuilding those neighborhoods as well.
Anything I haven't asked you about, or anything you would like to say about your life or the town or your job or anything that...
So, I mentioned I grew up in St. Andrews. My dad ran the St. Andrews Fish Market, which was right behind the shrimp boat for decades. And so that's where I first, you know, went to work and would take lunch breaks and go down to the marina where there was a magazine shop, a little place to eat, and, you know, would be sent over to the building to get the mail, you know. That's right across from the gas station there on Beck Avenue. So, you know, that freedom to just walk around down in St. Andrews.
Great little neighborhood.
Great
right?
little
That's
neighborhood.
What we're building back. Great
Yes.
little neighborhoods.
Yes.
That's as Panama City as it gets if your dad owned a fish market in St. Andrews. Like,
Yeah.
that's as Panama City as it gets right there.
So, you know, the Smith brothers, Smith's Yacht Basin, they were the owners until probably, I guess, the last 10 years of my dad's life. He was a leasing owner of the market.
It's very cool. Very cool. Well, Commissioner Lucas, thank you for doing this.
Thank you for all that you do for our community, Kevin. You and Lexi and your team.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Well, thank you. We're proud of ourselves in the town, right? We as a town are proud of ourselves, I think, for the first time in a long time. All right? And it feels good, doesn't it?
It does.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin.